I never thought a single conversation could change the course of my life forever. But it did. It started the way most ordinary days do. Coffee in my hand, the morning sun barely creeping through the blinds, and a message that would make my heart stop before I even read it. Her words were short, sharp, and almost cruel. "You could never be a father." That's what she said to me. My girlfriend, no, the woman I loved, looked me dead in the eyes, and I felt something inside me crack. I had spent years imagining a life with her, a family, late-night feedings, laughter spilling from our tiny apartment, the chaos of children's toys in the living room. And now, in one sentence, she tore all of that into pieces. I stared at her, my mind racing, my chest tight. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. But she didn't answer, not the way I wanted. Instead, she shook her head and walked away, leaving me in the silence that seemed louder than any scream. I replayed her words over and over in my head for days. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I never could be. I hated that part of me, the part that feared the possibility of failure, the part that doubted itself. And yet, deep down, a stubborn voice refused to give up. I wanted to prove her wrong. I wanted to be someone who could nurture, protect, and love a child unconditionally. But how could I, when the person who mattered most had already written me off? And then everything changed. Her sister reached out. Her message was hesitant, almost trembling. "I need your help," she said. "I don't have anyone else I can trust." I didn't know what she meant at first, but as she explained, my world tilted in a way I never expected. She was asking me to raise her child. Her child. A tiny human being who depended on someone, and she had chosen me. Me. I sat there staring at my phone, the words blurring as my mind tried to catch up. How could this happen? How could I be standing on the edge of something I never imagined, stepping into a role I wasn't prepared for, all because the woman I loved doubted me? I wanted to say no. I wanted to turn away and pretend this wasn't happening. But something inside me, maybe stubbornness, maybe hope, maybe love, made me pause. I couldn't ignore it. Not completely. I had no idea what I was agreeing to. I didn't know how this child would change me, or what it would cost. And I certainly didn't know how my world would shift, how fragile hearts would break, and how loyalties I never questioned would be tested in ways I couldn't even imagine. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. And that's when I realized stepping into this wasn't just about the child. It was about proving something, not to her, but to myself. Little did I know, the moment I said yes would launch me into a chain of events I could never have predicted, and it would all start with one simple decision that would haunt me forever. Before all of this, my life had been normal, I guess. Or at least as normal as it could feel when your heart was tied up in someone else. I was 25, working a steady job that paid the bills but didn't exactly thrill me, living in a small apartment that barely had space for two people, let alone the chaos of a child. And then there was her, my girlfriend, the woman who made everything feel brighter, even in the dullest moments. Her name was Maya. She was smart, beautiful, fiercely independent, and terrifyingly honest. Sometimes her honesty cut deeper than I expected, but I loved her for it anyway. She had dreams that seemed bigger than life, and a laugh that could make the worst day feel bearable. I thought we were in sync, building something real. But I guess I had underestimated how much fear and doubt she carried inside her. And then there was her sister, Lila, completely different from Maya in every way. Where Maya was fire, Lila was calm, gentle, always quietly observing the world. Lila had a softness about her, but beneath that softness was a strength you only noticed if you really paid attention. She had always been someone you could trust without question. Funny enough, I had known her longer than Maya. We had grown up in the same neighborhood, crossed paths countless times before Maya became a constant in my life. But we'd never been close, until that message changed everything. The situation was complicated, as you can imagine. Lila had been struggling for a while, and she had no one else to turn to. Her voice trembled when she explained it, and I could hear the exhaustion, the worry, and the desperation behind her words. Her life had become unmanageable, and she was looking at me, the one person she trusted enough to hand over the most precious thing in her life. I sat in my apartment for hours after that first conversation, trying to make sense of it all. I ran through every possible scenario. Could I really do this? Could I be the father figure to a child who wasn't mine by blood? How would Maya react if she ever found out? And the biggest question of all, was I really ready to take responsibility for a life that depended entirely on me? Everything about it felt like stepping into unknown territory. It wasn't just the practical side, feeding, diapers, sleepless nights. It was the emotional side. How do you love someone who isn't yours? How do you protect a life that isn't yours when the world around you might never understand? And most terrifying of all, how do you balance loyalty to Lila, loyalty to the child, and the fractured love story I already had with Maya? I had no answers. But the moment I looked at that tiny photograph of her child, her little face, trusting, innocent, I felt something stir inside me. Something I hadn't felt before. A responsibility, a hope, a fear, and an unshakable pull all at once. I knew taking this step wouldn't be simple. I knew it would change everything I thought I understood about life, love, and family. And yet, despite every warning, every fear, I found myself standing on the edge, ready to dive into something I didn't fully understand. Because what I didn't realize was that saying yes wouldn't just affect me. It would ripple through every relationship, every secret, and every heart connected to us. And some of those ripples were about to hit harder than I could ever imagine. Taking Lila's request seriously was easy. The hard part came when I actually tried to picture my life stepping into this role. I had never changed a diaper, never soothed a crying baby through the night, never been responsible for another life in the most literal sense. And yet, here I was, staring at the reality that I might have to. The first time I met her child, I froze. A tiny, fragile bundle in Lila's arms, with eyes that seemed too big for her small face, staring at me like she already knew I was a stranger. And maybe she did. How could I explain that I wasn't ready, that I wasn't the person anyone thought I could be, that even her mother, Maya, had already written me off? Lila watched me carefully, a mix of hope and desperation in her gaze. She didn't say it outright, but the unspoken message was clear: this child depends on you. Don't fail me. That pressure hit me harder than anything I had felt before. I wanted to say yes, but inside, I felt completely unprepared. Every instinct screamed, step back. You can't do this. And every part of me wanted to rise to the challenge. Then came Maya. I hadn't told her yet, and when I finally did, her reaction was worse than I feared. You? She asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and contempt. You're supposed to take care of a baby? Are you insane? It wasn't just disbelief. There was something in her tone, something sharper, something like the confirmation of what she had already said to me, that I wasn't capable, that I could never be a father. I felt cornered, torn between the woman I loved and the child I was being asked to protect. I wanted to defend myself, to prove her wrong, but every word seemed inadequate. Every plan I made felt fragile. Every moment of hesitation risked losing Lila's trust, or worse, the child's. And just when I thought the pressure couldn't get any higher, a new complication emerged. Something about Lila's situation she hadn't told me. Something that, if revealed, could change everything. I could feel it in the way she avoided certain questions, in the nervous glances she gave when she thought I wasn't looking. I realized then that this wasn't just about raising a child. It was about secrets, choices, and consequences I hadn't prepared for. And if I made one wrong move, I might lose everything. The truth was coming, and I had no idea if I could handle it. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety, confusion, and unexpected tenderness. I found myself waking up before the sun, preparing bottles, pacing the living room while the baby slept, feeling every ounce of responsibility pressing down on me. Each small victory, a smile, a quiet night, felt monumental. But each failure, spilled milk, sleepless nights, mistakes I couldn't undo, cut deeper than I expected. Lila's presence was constant. She hovered, offering guidance but never judgment, her calm reassurance the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. And yet, behind her soft words, I could sense something more, a tension, a worry she wasn't sharing. Every time she hesitated or looked away, I felt the weight of unspoken truths hanging between us like storm clouds. Then there was Maya. She kept her distance, but she was always watching. Sometimes with disbelief, sometimes with faint amusement, and sometimes, rarely, with what I thought might be regret. She didn't say much, but the silence between us was loaded with judgment and unasked questions. Every glance reminded me of her words. You could never be a father. And now, here I was, walking a line I didn't know I could balance. One night, everything began to crack. The baby wouldn't sleep, and I was exhausted, shaking from fatigue and fear. I called Lila, desperate for advice, but she sounded strained on the phone. I can't talk long, she whispered. Just do your best. You'll understand soon. My heart pounded. Understand what? My mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. The next morning, I tried to confront her about it. Lila, what is going on? What haven't you told me? But she avoided my gaze, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the baby's blanket. I'm sorry, it's complicated, she said softly. Complicated? That word didn't even begin to cover it. Then there were the small signs, letters I found tucked away, a text message I accidentally glimpsed on her phone, the way she flinched at certain questions. Something about this child, something about her life, was being kept from me. And the feeling in my gut told me it wasn't just a minor detail. This secret could shatter everything. My fragile confidence, the trust one had built, and the tentative connections forming between all of us. I started noticing patterns too late. Late-night phone calls, hushed conversations, cryptic messages. And the closer I got to understanding, the more I realized I was stepping into a web I couldn't control. Each revelation I pieced together only raised more questions. What had Lila been hiding? How did this child come to be? And, most importantly, how much of it was going to pull Maya, Lila, and me into chaos we couldn't escape? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground beneath me might give way at any moment. The answers were so close, yet so dangerous to reach. And in the deepest part of my chest, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Once the truth came out, nothing would ever be the same again. But I wasn't prepared for just how far that truth would go, or how much it would change the people I cared about most. I thought I had prepared myself for the worst. I thought I knew what Lila's secret could be. But when the truth finally slipped out, it hit me like a storm I wasn't ready for. Lila had been hiding more than just her struggles. The child, the one I had been caring for, loving, fearing I might fail, wasn't just her responsibility. She revealed, almost in a whisper, that the baby wasn't entirely hers to decide on. There was someone else involved, someone who had been legally and emotionally connected to the child in ways I hadn't imagined. My mind scrambled. Questions collided faster than I could answer them. Who else knew? Who else had a claim? And most terrifyingly, what if that person came for the baby? Then she said something I could barely process. You need to know, Maya isn't just someone who doubted you. She's connected to this in a way you'd never expect. I froze. My heart thudded so loudly it felt like the walls were shaking. Everything I had believed, the trust, the fragile bonds forming between us, all of it teetered on the edge of collapse. I realized then that my life, the child's life, and even my chance at love, were all about to be rewritten, whether I was ready or not. I never imagined fear and love could feel like the same thing, until that day. Everything came crashing down at once. Lila's secret, Maya's hidden connection, and the fragile bond one had formed with the child I had begun to love as my own. It started when Maya confronted me, her eyes burning with a mix of anger and guilt. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. But this child, this isn't just about her, she said. Her hands trembled as she held a legal document I hadn't noticed before. I'm the biological mother. I gave birth years ago, but circumstances forced me to leave the baby with Lila. I never thought I'd have to face this again. The room spun. My head throbbed. Everything I thought I knew had just shattered. The woman who told me I couldn't be a father, the one I loved, was actually connected to this child in a way I never could have imagined. And all this time, I had been raising the baby as my own, unaware of the invisible thread that tied Maya, Lila, and me together. I looked at the baby, her tiny hand curled around my finger, and felt a surge of something I couldn't name. Love, fear, desperation. This wasn't about proving myself anymore. It was about protecting a life that depended on me, regardless of biology, secrecy, or betrayal. We argued. We cried. We confronted truths we had all been avoiding. And somehow, amid the chaos, a fragile understanding formed. We were three adults tangled in a mess none of us could control, but we shared one responsibility none of us could escape: keeping this child safe, loved, and whole. Just when I thought we might finally find a way forward, Lila's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face paling. "It's them," she whispered. Before I could ask, the sound of a car door slamming outside sent a chill through me. Shadows moved at the edge of the window. Someone was coming. Someone with a claim to the child that none of us had prepared for. In that moment, I realized the storm wasn't over. Not even close. And as I held the baby closer, the truth hit me harder than ever. Protecting this child would demand everything I had, and then some. The tension outside felt like it would never end. But inside, holding the baby close, I realized something crucial. No matter who tried to intervene, no matter what the past had thrown at us, this child's safety and happiness were what mattered most. In that fragile clarity, the chaos outside seemed to fade for just a moment. Maya, Lila, and I sat down together, the silence between us heavy but necessary. Words we had avoided finally found their place. Maya confessed everything. The circumstances that had forced her to give up the child, the guilt she carried for doubting me, the fear that she might lose her again. Lila admitted how terrified she had been of judgment and rejection, how she had kept parts of the truth hidden to protect everyone, including me. And I told them the truth about myself, about the fear I felt every day, the doubts I had, the moments I thought I might fail. But I also told them how deeply I had come to love this little life, how every sleepless night, every tiny smile, had changed me in ways I never imagined possible. It wasn't easy. Nothing about this was easy. But by the time the sun dipped below the horizon, something had shifted. The anger, the fear, the betrayal. They didn't disappear, but they found a way to coexist with hope, trust, and love. We weren't a conventional family. We weren't even sure what we were yet. But we were something real, something human, something worth fighting for. The next days were still full of challenges. Legal matters, careful conversations, and logistical hurdles awaited us. But there was also laughter. The baby's tiny giggles began filling the apartment. Lila taught me how to soothe her with songs I'd never known. Maya watched quietly from the corner, her eyes softening as she saw the bond we had formed. One evening, as I rocked the baby to sleep, Maya finally whispered, "I underestimated you. I was wrong. You are capable." Her words, so simple, meant more than anything I could have imagined. And for the first time, I truly believed it. Not because she said it, but because I had proven it to myself. There were still questions unanswered, challenges ahead. But one thing was certain: love doesn't always follow the rules we expect. Sometimes it emerges in the most unlikely places, connecting the most unlikely people, and demanding more courage than we ever thought we had. I glanced at the two women who had reshaped my life, and then at the tiny face sleeping peacefully in my arms. Despite everything, the doubts, the fears, the secrets, I knew one truth above all: family isn't just what you're born into. It's what you choose to protect, nurture, and love, even when it terrifies you. And as I closed the door on the day's chaos, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I had become exactly the father I never thought I could be. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world outside our little apartment still held surprises, ones that could challenge everything we had fought for. And somehow, I knew we weren't ready for the next chapter yet.